Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really zoning in on this extreme heat wave hitting the Far East. It's serious.
It really is. We've been looking through the reports, the pasted text, as we call it.
Yeah, our mission today is basically to unpack what's happening right now, what's causing it, this thing called a heat dome, and maybe touch on what it could mean down the line.
Yeah,
Without getting too bogged down.
absolutely. And what strikes me first is just the raw numbers. Temperatures getting up towards 49 degrees Celsius in some areas, that's extreme.
49. Wow. And it's not just a quick spike, is it? The reports mention how long it's lasting.
Exactly. It's the duration as much as the peak heat. It's widespread, covering a huge area.
Like, there was that specific place mentioned, Nawabshah in Pakistan.
Right. They've had, I think the number was 33 days over 40 Celsius already.
33 days. That's just hard to even imagine. It's not a heat wave. It's more like a permanent feature at that point.
It feels like it for the people living there, definitely. And that prolonged heat, it just builds pressure on everything.
Okay, so let's talk about why this heat dome thing. How does that work exactly?
Well, think of it like a big cap or a lid in the atmosphere. High pressure, really strong high pressure, parks itself over a region.
A cap.
And this high pressure forces air downwards. When air sinks, it compresses and that heats it up. Plus, this lid traps the warm air already near the surface and stops any cooler weather systems from, getting in and clearing things out.
So it's like a feedback loop.
Yeah.
The heat gets trapped, it gets hotter, and the system just sits there.
That's a good way to put it. It's very stable, very stubborn. That's why the heat persists for so long.
Okay, I get the mechanism, but what does that mean for people on the ground? What are the actual impacts we're seeing?
Well, the consequences are pretty severe, and they stack up. First, you've got the land drying out incredibly fast. That means a huge risk of drought developing or getting worse.
Right, evaporation goes way up.
Exactly. And dry land plus extreme heat. That's prime wildfire condition. We have to watch out for that.
Makes sense. And what about people's health? And, infrastructure?
Huge strain there. Hospitals likely see more heat stroke, heat exhaustion, all sorts of heat-related illnesses, especially for vulnerable people.
Yeah, of course.
And then there's the power grid. Everyone's blasting air conditioning if they have it, putting immense demand on electricity supplies. You risk blackouts.
So the whole cascade of problems, drought, fire risk, health emergencies, power strain, a really grim picture.
It is. And that's just the immediate stuff.
Right, because the reports, the pasted text, also hinted at longer-term worries. What are we talking about there?
Well, if these kinds of intense, prolonged heat events become, say, the new normal due to climate change, that's where it gets really concerning.
So.
There's the potential, mentioned in the sources, that some areas could become essentially uninhabitable, consistently facing temperatures that are dangerous for human life.
Uninhabitable. That's a heavy thought.
It is. And the potential consequence of that is large-scale displacement. People having to move simply because their homes are no longer survivable climates.
Mass migrations driven by heat. That sounds like a massive global challenge waiting to happen.
It could be, yes. It forces us to think about adaptation and resilience on a whole different scale.
Okay, so wrapping this up then. If you had to boil it down, what are the main things our listeners should take away from this deep dive on the Far East heat wave?
I'd say, 1, the sheer intensity and the unusual length of this heat. 2, it's being driven by this specific weather pattern, the heat dome.
Right.
And 3, the immediate impacts are severe health, resources, fire risk. But we also have to consider the really serious long-term possibility of regions becoming uninhabitable if this trend continues.
It really underscores how connected global climate is, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
So maybe a final thought for you, the listener. Given that these extreme events aren't just isolated incidents anymore, what kind of actions, maybe small, maybe big, individual, or collective, do you think might actually help lessen these impacts down the road? Not just there, but everywhere. Something to think about. Thanks for diving deep with us today.